What is a family Sentry trust? So there's a couple different names. You might have heard of this as a credit protection trust, or a bunch of different names. In my office, we call a family Sentry trust. Think of like a sentry, right? A guard, someone who's guarding the assets that are in a trust, all right? So when might you use this, right? Just to give you an example, kind of an idea here. So let's say you have a child who's suffering from drug and alcohol addiction, right? Or they've got a bunch of creditors. Maybe they're in a risky business, and so they're constantly getting sued, owed money and whatnot. And if you leave money outright to that person, right? Outright to your child, if they're an addict, you know, hopefully not, but unfortunately they might use all of that. If they get a large sum of money, that might be a really bad thing for them, because they're going to go out and you know, get drugs, alcohol, and all of that, and just further kind of ruin their life. Or if you leave them money and they've got creditors, well, as soon as you leave them that money, if they've got IRS liens, the IRS is going to come in and take it from their bank account, or the creditors are going to have access to it. So in a lot of instances, you just might not want them to have the money. Or let's say, you know, take those really bad things. Let's say they're just bad at managing money. And you know, if you give them $100,000, $200,000, $1 million, whatever it is, they're just going to spend it. So a lot of times our clients will say, hey, listen, I want my child to have the money. I just don't want to give them direct access to it because I'm afraid of what might happen to them or what they might do with the money. Great. So what we'll do is we'll set up what's called a family Sentry trust. That means the money is going to go into another trust for that child. They do not have immediate access to it. So they cannot just go to wherever the money is being held and say, hey, give me all the money in it. I want to go buy X. Because there's a third, what we would call an independent trustee, somebody else who's managing the money. Not necessarily in terms of investing it, could be, but an independent trustee who's in charge of giving money or not giving money to that individual. Why might you want this? Again, let's say that the child is still suffering from drugs. Well, he or she goes to the independent trustee and asks for $200,000. Well, the independent trustee might not feel it's in their best interest to give this person $200,000, right? Now, there's nothing to say they can't give them money, right? So this is someone that you trust, so you trust their judgment and whatnot. But you're not just going to give them all that money outright. Or again, they're getting sued. Now's not the time to give them $1 million when there's potentially going to be a judgment against them. And so this protects them from themselves. Do you always want it to be set up like that? Most parents know. Most parents say, hey, listen, if my child cleans up their act, let's give them the money. I don't want them to have to, you know, a third party to be managing their money when they're in their 70s. Great. So you can build in incentives into that family Sentry trust that says, hey, upon, you know, 7 successful drug tests, whatever, or if they continue to go to therapy, if whatever incentives if they go to college and they take an X amount of courses and they maintain a B average, whatever it is, you can build in and say then they get a certain amount of access to it. So it's a very restrictive trust. It's not meant to necessarily to harm people. It's actually meant to protect them from themselves and make sure they get them the most use of the money. So if you're going through something like that, or you're wondering, hey, you know, I don't know if my kid would be ready for this, and I think someone else should manage it for them, then doing a family Sentry trust probably makes a lot of sense.